I warned him. I told him the truth that if we didn't act now, the company would collapse. He didn't listen. He laughed in my face. A week later, his empire was nothing but ashes. The part you won't believe, his downfall wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Before we continue, make sure to hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'd love to know which part of the world you're sharing this story with me. The office smelled of fresh coffee and expensive cologne, but beneath it all, I could sense something rotten. The numbers in my hands told a story no one wanted to admit. And numbers don't lie. What I carried that morning wasn't just a stack of papers. It was the truth. A truth sharp enough to cut through every illusion of success in that building. I laid everything out in front of him. Charts, forecasts, risk reports, every line, every figure, every warning light blinking red. It all screamed the same thing. We had days, not months, before disaster struck. But instead of leaning forward, instead of paying attention, he leaned back in his leather chair. He crossed his arms, and then he smirked. That smirk alone carried more arrogance than words ever could. Then came the laugh. Short, sharp, dismissive. The kind of laugh that tells you, I'm untouchable. You're nothing. It wasn't just rejection. It was a dismissal of me, of my work, of everything I had poured myself into for years. That laugh burned. It lodged itself deep inside my chest, not as shame, but as a quiet fire waiting to grow. I walked out of his office with a knot in my stomach, but also with clarity. A storm was coming. I had done my part. I had spoken the truth. And while he leaned on arrogance, I carried certainty. He had no idea how unprepared he was for what was about to hit him. Then it happened. One by one, contracts fell through. Clients who once sang his praises backed away. Investors, once eager, began to vanish into the shadows. The same board that once nodded along with his every word suddenly panicked. Fear spread like wildfire. You could feel it in the hallways. Phones rang non-stop. Papers scattered, desks emptied faster than I had ever seen. And there he was, the same man who laughed in my face, now sitting at his grand desk, staring blankly at screens filled with numbers bleeding red. I stood back and watched the empire he thought was unshakable begin to crumble in real time. And in his silence, I finally heard what I needed to, his arrogance breaking. But here's the twist. His downfall wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. Because when his empire collapsed, the same people who once ignored me began to look my way. They wanted answers. They wanted guidance. And for the first time, the power shifted. You see, arrogance destroys faster than failure ever could. And as the dust began to settle, I realized this wasn't just about his fall. This was about my rise. The downfall didn't strike like lightning. It began slowly, almost quietly, like cracks forming in glass that no one notices until it shatters. At first, it was subtle, a cancelled meeting with a key investor, a client who suddenly needed more time to think. He dismissed it with his usual arrogance, assuring everyone that business was booming, that he had everything under control. But I knew better. I had seen the signs weeks earlier, when the numbers began to shift, when the confidence in the room had started to fade. Small cracks always turn into bigger ones, and once they spread, there's no stopping the break. And then, the real storm came. Within days, deals began slipping through our fingers. Longtime partners backed out without explanation. Clients who once praised his leadership now avoided his calls. The very empire he had mocked me for questioning was unraveling right before our eyes, piece by piece, deal by deal. I still remember sitting in the boardroom, watching the panic unfold like a scene from a film. Papers were scattered across the table, phones rang endlessly, and voices overlapped in chaos, each one trying to shout louder than the last. The energy in the room was frantic, heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of panic that no amount of arrogance could talk away. And him, the man who had laughed in my face when I tried to warn him. For the first time, his composure cracked. His skin looked drained of color. His jaw clenched so tightly, it seemed like it might break. His hands, once steady and confident, tapped uncontrollably against the wooden table, as if movement alone could save him, but nothing could. Because this was the moment he feared most, the moment when power slipped out of his hands, and no amount of charm, denial, or intimidation could bring it back. I saw the fear in his eyes, and for a brief second I almost pitied him. Almost. The collapse spread quickly. Investors were the first to abandon ship, pulling millions with them in a single decision. Without their backing, the foundation weakened. Then came the clients, one after another, severing ties to avoid being associated with a sinking empire. In less than a week, the company that once seemed unstoppable stood on the edge of ruin. Inside the building, the staff could feel it too. Whispers filled the hallways. People exchanged anxious glances, and resumes quietly printed on the office machines told the truth that no one dared to say aloud. Everyone knew it was over. And yet, in the middle of the chaos, something unexpected happened. As his authority crumbled, eyes began to turn toward me. The board, once dismissive of my concerns, leaned in closer when I spoke. Clients reached out directly, trusting my judgment over his. The same people who had once treated me as if my voice didn't matter suddenly depended on it. At that moment, I realized that a collapse doesn't just destroy, it also shifts power. His arrogance had undone him, but my patience, my silence, and the truth I had spoken, those became my strength. As he sat in the ruins of the empire he had thought was untouchable, I felt something stir inside me. Not revenge, not yet, but clarity. His fall was inevitable. But mine? My rise was just beginning. When the company finally collapsed, the noise stopped. The boardroom arguments, the endless phone calls, the scrambling for last-minute investors suddenly, it all went quiet. But silence, I learned, can be louder than chaos. It was in that stillness that the real truth came out. He had lost everything. The man who once filled rooms with his booming voice, who dismissed warnings and laughed at caution, now avoided eye contact and retreated into his office like a ghost. His empire was gone, and with it, the arrogance that had defined him. But here's the thing about silence. It doesn't just reveal loss. It reveals who's still standing when the dust settles. And that time, it was me. I watched as emails from former allies disappeared. Partners who had once sung his praises now spoke his name with disdain. The staff, those who hadn't already fled, walked the halls with the uneasy quiet of people who knew their futures were uncertain. And him? He barely spoke. The man who never stopped talking now struggled to string a sentence together. His phone, which once never stopped ringing, sat dark on his desk. He used to pride himself on being untouchable, unreachable at times. Now, no one wanted to reach him at all. The silence wasn't just in the building. It was in him. But silence is also a teacher. And sitting there, in that hollow company, I realized something I had ignored for too long. Arrogance doesn't just blind people, it deafens them. He hadn't heard me because he couldn't. He was so consumed with his own certainty that another voice, no matter how true, couldn't break through. And now, all that was left for him was regret. I saw it in his posture, in the way he stared out of the office window, as if looking for an answer that had never been there. For me, though, that silence felt different. It wasn't heavy. It was empowering. I thought back to the day I warned him, the way he laughed in my face as though my words were nothing more than background noise. And yet, here we were. The very noise he had ignored was now the only truth standing. His empire lay in ruins, but my voice, the one he refused to hear, had been right all along. And in that realization, I felt something shift. The tables weren't just turning, they had already turned. Still, I won't lie. There was a part of me that felt the sting of bitterness. Because it wasn't just about the company collapsing. It was about being dismissed, belittled, made to feel small when I had been right. That cut deeper than the financial ruin. That was personal. And as I sat there in the quiet, I made myself a promise. Silence may have taken him, but it would not take me. I would rise not out of spite alone, but out of respect for myself, for the truth I carried when no one else would listen. The silence that surrounded him was the beginning of his end. But for me, it was the beginning of something else entirely, the plan I had been waiting to set in motion. And when I made my next move, the shock would echo louder than anything he had ever laughed at. The day I picked up the phone to call my lawyer, my hands didn't shake. They were steady, calm, almost too calm for the weight of what I was about to do. I wasn't making this choice in anger, even though part of me had every right to. I wasn't making it to get even, though God knows revenge had crossed my mind more than once. No, this was different. This was about fairness. For the first time in years, I was choosing to be fair to myself. I had given this company my energy, my late nights, my weekends, my life. I had poured warnings, advice, solutions into its veins, and every time I was ignored. Every time my voice was drowned out by arrogance. And when it all collapsed, I realized something. Loyalty means nothing if it's one-sided. You cannot keep saving someone who doesn't want to be saved. You cannot keep giving when all they do is take. That was the truth I carried as I dialed my lawyer's number. The words came out easier than I expected. I want to make a change, I said. He asked me what kind. I told him the kind that would make people listen, the kind that would show them I wasn't just a shadow in someone else's empire. This time, I wanted my voice to leave a mark. He went silent for a moment, perhaps surprised by how certain I sounded, but certainty was all I had left. As I hung up, I stared out the window at the city lights. The skyline used to make me feel small, like just another piece in a puzzle too big to matter. But not that night. That night, the lights looked different. They looked like proof that everything built can also be broken, and if it can be broken, it can be rebuilt, stronger, smarter, without the arrogance that poisons everything. That was the plan. Not destruction, for the sake of destruction, but rebuilding on my own terms. Still, I knew one thing for sure. When the others found out, when they realized the decision I had made, it would shake them. They had expected me to stay quiet, to stay loyal even after betrayal. But silence was never going to be my ending. Not this time. So I prepared myself for the storm that was coming, for the shock on their faces, when they realized I had turned the tables in ways they never thought I could. Because betrayal doesn't always come with a shout. Sometimes it comes with a signature on a paper, with a decision made in calm resolve. And that night, I had made mine. I wasn't thinking about their empire anymore. I was thinking about mine. And if they thought the collapse was the end of the story, they had no idea what was waiting just around the corner. The collapse didn't end the story. It cleared the room. When the dust settled, the noise faded, and something sharper took its place. I sat at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and a folder I'd been building for months. Not secrets, not gossip. Facts. Contracts, timeline screens, vendor tickets, risk memos stamped received, dates, signatures. My paper trail wasn't art. It was architecture. Built brick by brick because I knew one day the wind would pick up. I did not steal company data. I did not spy. I used what I had the right to keep. My work, my emails, my notes, my calendar. I matched that with public filings, board minutes the company sent to my inbox, and vendor statements that had my name on them. I made a simple map. What I warned, when I warned it, who I warned, what they did next. Each line on that map closed a loop, and each loop led to one door. Accountability. I called my lawyer first. Quiet voice, steady tone. We walked through the map line by line. This wasn't revenge. It was protection. Of my name, my work, the teams that had trusted me. We drafted a clean whistleblower packet for the audit committee chair, not for the CEO. We included the timeline, the attachments, the part everyone forgets, the the clear practical fixes I had proposed before the fall. I wasn't there to say, "I told you so." I was there to show how the fire started and how it could have been stopped. Next, I reached out to 2 customers who had once called me at midnight for help and remembered I had always picked up. I didn't trade secrets. I offered honesty. Here's what happened inside. Here's what I'm doing to make it right. They didn't slam the door. They asked questions. They wanted stability more than outrage. People often do. Then I made one last call to a quiet investor who never appeared in press photos, but always asked the most dangerous question in business. Show me the risk. I sent him the same packet. No flair, no spin, just light. By morning, the board had scheduled an informal check-in. By noon, it became an emergency session. The subject line changed, but my plan did not. I put on a plain suit and a calm face. I carried only 3 things into that room: the facts, my patience, and the knowledge that I had done the work when it wasn't popular. In the hallway outside the boardroom, the CEO brushed past me, jaw set, cologne loud. "You," he said, "did this." I didn't blink. "No," I said. "The numbers did." He smirked like the week hadn't happened. Arrogance can survive anything except daylight. Inside, I slid the packet onto the table and let silence do what speeches cannot. No drama, no gloating, just the steady weight of proof. For the first time since I'd stood in his office and warned him, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control, not over people, over my choices. The table had turned, not by force, but by gravity. Truth is heavy. Eventually, it lands. And as the directors began to read, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This story wasn't going to end with a collapse. It was about to begin with a reckoning. Revenge in stories is loud. In real life, it's quiet. You don't slam doors. You open windows. You don't shout. You document. You don't burn bridges. You light the path and let people decide which way they'll walk. That was my posture as the board's outside counsel dialed in, the audit chair cleared her throat, and the first real questions landed like stones in still water. Why were these risk memos not escalated? Who signed this renewal without remediation? Explain the variance between this forecast and the recorded churn. The CEO tried the classics, blamed the market, blamed the vendors, and blamed the team. But the map on the table had no room for fog. My emails were short, dated, and painfully clear. Known exploit in third-party library. Patch required before Q3. Churn spike flagged in Tier A accounts. Root cause attached. Stopgap accepted on the condition that we re-architect by the end of quarter. Every warning matched a missed step. Every suggestion matched a door ignored. I answered without heat. Here's the ticket. Here is the call note. Here is the acceptance of risk. I didn't overplay. I didn't guess. I didn't swing for headlines. I kept bringing the board back to the same 2 ideas. The fire started where corners were cut, and the smoke spread because we pretended not to see it. It's hard to argue with a timeline that has your initials on it. Then came the part nobody expected. I didn't ask for his job. I didn't demand a title. I asked for a plan. If you want to keep customers, I said, we start with transparency. We publish a status page with real metrics. We issue credit fairly. We rebuilt the architecture that should have been rebuilt last year. We stop selling what we can't support. And we tell the truth to the market before the market tells the truth about us. The investor in the corner watched me the way only people who count watch, not the performative nod, the calculator kind. "How long does it take to steady the ship?" he asked. 90 days to stop the bleeding, I said. 6 months to rebuild trust, a year to earn back growth. Cost? Less than the lawsuit you'll get if you don't. The CEO scoffed. Doom and gloom. The audit chair didn't smile. Practical and specific, she said. The room's temperature changed by a degree you could feel. That night, I walked home in the cold and didn't check my phone. I made dinner, washed the pan, and stood at the sink until the water ran cool. I thought about every late night I had pushed through, every no I'd swallowed, because I was told to be a team player. Quiet can be a cage. It can also be a forge. This time it was the latter. By morning, 3 directors had emailed me directly. "Bring your plan," one wrote. "No slides," wrote another. Just numbers. When power starts listening, it doesn't do it all at once. It turns its head a little, then a little more. You don't force it. You keep talking to the part that wants to hear. The counterattack wasn't a leak or a stunt. It was a standard we should have kept from day one. And the more I stuck to it, the more the story changed. From mine versus his, to truth versus noise. In business, that's how you win. You make the truth the only thing that scales. The emergency session felt different from the first. Fewer smiles, more paper. 2 seats empty, legal counsel on their way. The CEO walked in last, late enough to send a message, early enough to pretend it wasn't one. He took the head of the table. The chair tapped her pen. "Let's proceed." I spoke for 20 minutes. Not a second more. Architecture, risk, churn, cash runway. I broke the plan into 3 clear stages. Stabilize, rebuild, grow, and put a hard number on each. I listed the decisions that had to stop. Selling vapor, hiding outages, accepting revenue at the cost of trust. I named the ones we needed now. A security lead with authority, a customer task force with teeth, a moratorium on features until the foundation was held. No theatre, no blame. Just a path. Then I stopped talking. The COO went next and surprised me. He didn't defend. He confirmed. "We cut corners," he said. "We dressed in numbers." We told ourselves we'd fix it later. 2 VPs followed, with their own small truths, each one a thread that pulled the whole fabric down. The investor in the corner never looked up from his notes. When it was the CEO's turn, he chose volume over proof. "This is disloyal," he said. We were growing. We had momentum. You can't let a few setbacks define us. He waved at the packet like it might blow away if he moved enough air. "This is fear talking." The audit chair closed her binder. "This is evidence," she said. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. Directors glanced at one another the way people do when the thing they've thought privately is finally safe to say out loud. The general counsel arrived, whispered to the chair, and took a seat. The chair folded her hands. "We appreciate your leadership through the early years," she told the CEO. "But we cannot ignore this record." A pause, long enough to mark the moment. "We propose a transition. Effective today." He laughed, a small brittle sound. "You can't run this company without me." The investor finally looked up. "On the contrary," he said, "that is the only way we can run it." There was a vote. Hands rose. One stayed down his. The motion passed. He stood red with anger and leaned across the table toward me. "You think you win," he hissed. "You just inherited a mess you can't fix." I didn't rise. "I didn't inherit it," I said. "I prepared for it." After he left, the door clicked with the gentle finality of change. The chair turned to me. "Interim," she said. 90 days. Do what you said." I nodded once. Not victory, responsibility. When I stepped into the hallway, the office felt smaller, as if the building had exhaled. People glanced up from screens, hope and doubt sharing the same look. I didn't give a speech. I walked to the war room, rolled up my sleeves, and pinned the plan to the wall. Stage 1, stabilize. We started with the truth. Reckonings are not about punishment. They're about alignment between what we say and what we do. In that room, we finally matched the two. And when we did, the company was broken, bruised, but breathing. Took its first honest breath in a long time. The first week as interim wasn't glamorous. It was call after call, Apology after apology, fix after fix. We published a real status page and kept it updated with no spin, no delay. We offered credits before customers asked. We froze new features and poured every brain we had into the foundation. An angry tweet turned into a call, then a plan, then a saved account. One by one, we stopped the leaks. Inside the company, fear softened into focus. Engineers who had been told to ship magic finally got permission to build reality. Support reps who had been blamed for everything finally got air cover and tools. Sales stopped promising the moon and started selling the road we could actually pave. Culture didn't change because I said words. It changed because people saw their work matter again. I met with the team at 7 a.m. every morning. No big speeches. 3 questions. What's real? What hurts? What helps? The whiteboard filled up with plain truths and small wins. The day we hit 2 weeks without a major incident, someone brought in donuts. Not to celebrate, to say, we notice. It sounds small. It isn't. Outside, the market watched, wary and tired. I didn't pitch. I reported, weekly notes, what we fixed, what broke, what's next. Investors asked how we'd grow again. Later, I said. First, we earn the right to survive. It's amazing how fast trust grows when you stop trying to force it. The board offered me the permanent role. I said no. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because my job had never been the spotlight. It was the signal. I recommended someone from within a quiet operator with a spine of steel. They chose her. The team cheered the loudest I had ever heard them cheer. On my last day as interim, I walked to the rows, thanked people by name, and left a handwritten note on the war room wall. Keep choosing what's true over what's easy. No logo, no title, just the line that had gotten us through. As for the former CEO, he did what most people do when the story ends without them. He rewrote it. Interviews, posts, excuses. That's fine. The company didn't answer back. We were busy working. Revenge is better than rage. It's recovery. It's your work standing on its own feet and refusing to move for anyone's ego ever again. Sometimes the win isn't the crown. It's the compass. The week he laughed, I felt small. The week we rebuilt, I didn't think about him at all. And that's the truth about power. It leaves you when you stop feeding it. We fed the right thing instead. If this story stayed with you, tap like and subscribe for more. Share your own thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And when you're ready for the next chapter, just click the box on the screen. Your next story is waiting.